Hello and welcome back to Stop and Go F1 for this, our driver ratings for the Japanese Grand Prix of 2024. There you go. Even said the year, so you definitely know you're watching the correct video for this one. Make sure you like and subscribe before we get into everything. If you haven't seen a video like this before, it's pretty straightforward. I'm sure you'll get the hang of it very quickly. We're going to give each driver a score between 1 and 10, depending on how well they did this weekend. It's as simple as that. Let's start with Kevin Magnussen. So, you know what? Haas are having a fantastic year. I know we're only 4 races in, but even still, they're having a great time. And they came into the year going, we're going to be awful. But I think both of the Haas lads, probably Hulkenberg more than Magnussen, but still both of them are actually driving incredibly well, making very few mistakes and just gaining positions where others are messing up. And that was the same again here for Kevin Magnussen. Qualifying wasn't too great, qualified 18th, but turned it around in the race to come home in 13th place. I'm going to give him a 6 out of 10 for that, a good performance from K-Mag. But Hulkenberg, once again, went a bit above and beyond what his teammate did, because he qualified 12th, came home in 11th, wasn't too far off the back of Yuki Tsunoda in P10, missing out on a point there. But yeah, another great performance from Nico Hulkenberg. I'm going to give him an 8 out of 10. With the Haas lads, it's an interesting one because there's been a lot of speculation as to where they will be next year. Because I think it's pretty much confirmed that Ollie Behrman will be in one of the Haases next year. Which means that one of these two is probably not going to be there next year. And who's it going to be? Because there's all these rumours that Hulkenberg is basically wanted by a lot of teams up and down the grid. Namely, the Stake F1 team Kick Sauber, which would then become Audi. Sorry there, I had to have a little cough. But at the minute, they're not looking too great. I know it can all change, and I know their main thing is their pit stops aren't great. But if I had to choose right now to drive a Haas or drive a Sauber, I would choose the Haas. And you know, who knows how it's going to be when Audi put their investment in. But yeah, that's an interesting one for there. In terms of Magnussen, I think a lot of people expected him to retire at the end of this year. But he's pulling out some great performances. And I think, you know, at this point, it's like, nah, you've still got it. Stick around, K-Mag. We'll see how it goes. And we just spoke about them, but here are the Stake F1 Team Kick Sauber drivers. Not a great weekend for Zhou. Qualifies dead last. I think someone said it was like for the second or third time in a row. I don't know if that's true or not, but yeah, dead last. In the race itself, didn't get up so much. Pitted about 3 times in 16 laps, and then had to retire due to a gearbox failure. So, I mean, what can you do, really? It's a difficult one to score because, I mean, he made up some good positions from the start, but then had to throw it all away. So, I don't know. It's a 1 or a 2, realistically, because you're not getting many points for qualifying last. I'll give him a 2 because the DNF wasn't his fault. There we go. That's me being kind. Valtteri Bottas, though. What a great weekend for him, all things considered. I mean, you know, we expected him to be out in Q1. He put in a fantastic performance to qualify 13th. In the race itself, finished in 14th place. The pit stops this weekend were a little bit better. They were 4 seconds rather than 40, but still not exactly where you would expect. Despite this, he put in a good performance and got some good overtakes and got the car into a good position. I think once they're on top of those pit stops, they could be there with the Haases. I know I just said that I'd rather be in the Haas than the Sauber, but you know they could be there fighting against those, maybe the Racing Bills if they're in that position for that last point. So yeah, things are looking to go in the right direction for this team. And, you know, I think Bottas did pretty well. So, Valtteri Bottas, I will give him, you know what, I'm going to give him an 8. I wrote down 7 on my piece of paper, but I'm going to give him an 8, just because I think his actual individual performance this weekend was very good, and he was let down by things that weren't his fault, as many people are in most races. But yeah, I thought this is one of the first times in a long time when I've gone, wow, Valtteri, that was a really good race. So yeah, 8 out of 10, Valtteri Bottas. Now here's someone who did very well as well. Home race for Yuki Tsunoda. Qualified 10th, finished the race in 10th, was pretty consistent all the way through. I'll give him, it's an 8 or a 9. I feel like because I've just given Valtteri an 8, I have to go with a 9. Yeah, but the only thing that's kind of making me say 8 is he was a long way off of ninth place. Who was in ninth? It was Hamilton, yeah. So he was a long way off that group there, but to be fair, I think there is a big gap in performance from those top 5 teams to where Yuki Tsunoda and the Racing Bulls and the rest of the grid are. So yeah, a 9 for Yuki I think is very fair for what was a fantastic race weekend. Yet again, really proving himself to be one of the best there. So well done to Yuki Tsunoda and his first time scoring points in his home Grand Prix. Daniel Ricciardo now. This is a hard one because his qualifying was alright to be fair. He qualified 11th. He wasn't far off Yuki whatsoever. Very close. Probably, I think that's his best qualifying of the season so far. And then got caught up in that lap 1 incident. By caught up, I mean he caused it. I would say now that it's a racing incident, and I don't think he deserves a penalty or anything like that. I think it's just one of those things that happens. But yeah, it was. I'd say the majority share of the blame would fall on Ricciardo. Yeah, it's an interesting one for him. I don't know. I've written down a 3 for him. Just because, yeah, his qualifying was good. But it wasn't great qualifying. And then that incident was mostly his fault, so I think a 3 is actually quite fair. I feel bad giving Ricciardo low scores, because I like him and I want him to do well. But yeah, it's not going his way thus far in the season, but I don't think they're going to drop him mid-season. Oh, that's Yuki again. I don't think they're going to drop him mid-season. I think they will give him the entire season just because of the respect they have for him and what he's done for not just that team, but the main Red Bull team as well. And I think he can turn this around, and well, this will just be a blip for him, I think, in the end. But his chances of being in the Red Bull seat next year are now looking incredibly slim. So yeah, it's an interesting one to keep an eye on as we go throughout the year. Across to Logan Sargent now, who qualified 19th, finished the race itself in 17th. He also had that crash in FP1 as well. Yeah, not a great qualifying. He beat Zhou, and then in the race itself, at one point it looked like he was making some good moves, but then upon reflection, it's just because the Alpines were ahead of him, and they were god-awful in race pace. He got into a decent position at the end, and then threw it all the way, locking up and going off into the gravel. So, yeah, not much you can say about Logan Sargent's race weekend. Not a great one. I'm going to give him a 2. That's very fair. Yeah, I feel harsh about giving it to Logan Sargent as well, but really, realistically, what can you reward him for this weekend? It's not one of his best. It seems like this track is not one which he performs well at. Hopefully, he can make a big comeback in China. Here is Alexander Albon. He qualified 14th and didn't finish the race. So good qualifying for him. Got the car in a good position. Then got hit by Daniel Ricciardo. Not much he could do at all there. I'm going to give him a 4. And we'll just leave it there. I can't really say much about Albon. Here's Esteban Ocon. This weekend was the first weekend of the year that Alpine had brought upgrades. And it appears that their qualifying pace has improved. Race pace, not so much. So Ocon qualified 15th, finished 15th. The only ones he beat were his teammate and Logan Sargent of the guys who finished. I mean, I'll give him a 6 because he beat his teammate. It seems like Alpine are very much just in a race of their own at the minute, where it's just, can you beat the other Alpine because they're not beating anyone else. The fact that he had a half-decent qualifying also gives him a good score there. His teammate Pierre Gasly wasn't as good in qualifying. Qualifying 17th, would end up finishing the race in 16th. I'll just give him a 5. Yeah, Alpine in a very, very bad way at the minute. And needs to be kind of looking to fix that as soon as possible. Not Logan Sargent, Lance Stroll. Wow, not a good weekend for Lance Stroll either, which is a bit mad. Aston brought a lot of upgrades to the race this weekend, and Lance Stroll qualified 16th, which is shocking, which is his worst qualifying of the year. And in the hands of Fernando Alonso, the Aston looked the best it had all year, whilst in the hands of Lance Stroll, it looked the worst it had all year, apart from the time it was in that wall in Saudi Arabia. He would finish the race itself in 12th, so he gained some positions. But when you look at the pace that Alonso had, in comparison, Lance Stroll should be finishing minimum 10th every race in that car. Because I think the gap from, like I said before, Yuki Tsunoda, the gap of those top 5 teams to the bottom 5 teams is quite considerable at this point. So I think the car that Stroll has is a hell of a lot better than the car that Yuki has. And the fact that he wasn't just behind Yuki, but also behind Hülkenberg, and those two were miles off the back of Lewis Hamilton. It really just was not a good time for Lance Stroll this weekend. I've written down a 4 for him on my piece of paper, but upon reflection, I think it's even worse than a 4. Because to say giving him a 4 would be the same as what I've given Albon, and he had a good qualifying. So I think for Stroll, I'll give him a 3. Really, yeah, not good. Fernando Alonso, though, a better weekend for him, qualifying 5th, which was very impressive. Finished the race itself in 6th. I'm going to give him an 8, because that was a good weekend for Fernando Alonso. He seemed to be very happy in the post-race interviews with how his performance went. The Aston's nowhere near as good as it was this time last year, but still, it seems to be heading in a good direction. I know a track like China, which he has a lot of experience at, and it's a track where a lot of the drivers, they'll be driving there for the very first time. Maybe he can use that experience with this new Aston to get some good points in 2 weeks' time. McLaren are next. Oscar Piastri was a bit of an anonymous one, really. Qualified 6th, and just went backwards and finished the race in 8th place. I'm going to give him a 5. I don't really know what happened to him, if I'm honest with you. He got passed by Alonso, and he got passed by Russell. And I mean, Russell had an awful weekend, all things considered. And the fact that he beat Piastri at a track where Piastri was on the podium last year, yeah, really not a good one for Piastri. It's his first, I think it's his first weekend ever that I've come away going, I think he could do better. Yeah, so it's a shame, but hopefully he can turn that around. His teammate had a much better weekend. That was Lando Norris. Qualified a very impressive 3rd. No surprises that he also went backwards. I don't think he really had the pace to keep the Ferraris behind him. Finishing the race in 5th. I'm going to give him an 8 out of 10, though. Very good performance from him. Carlos Sainz continues to be incredibly impressive in the Ferrari, qualifying 4th, finishing the race in 3rd, completing the podium. Had to come through the grid a few times, make some good overtakes there. Really good stuff from Sainz. I'm going to give him a 10 out of 10. His teammate Charles Leclerc, also a very impressive race from him. Qualifying-wise, really actually quite disappointing for Leclerc. Qualifying P8. The Ferrari had a lot more pace than the 8th place that he put it in. And I would say he's easily the best qualifier on the grid, so I don't really know what happened there. But this is 2 qualifying sessions in a row now where Leclerc isn't necessarily too happy with his position, but he more than made up for it with a fantastic recovery drive to finish 4th. He was the only guy, I think, who made the one-stop work. I'm going to give him a 9. Reason not being a 10 is just because that qualifying wasn't necessarily there. Across to Mercedes now, and it's another bad weekend for Mercedes. I really don't know what's going on here. So George Russell, he actually did half decently, to be fair. Qualifying in ninth, which is the first time this year that he's qualified behind Lewis Hamilton, and finished the race in seventh. So I'm going to just give him a 6. And then Lewis Hamilton actually did the opposite. He qualified in seventh and finished the race in ninth. I'll give him a 5. Really bad weekend for both of them. I mean, the strategy just wasn't there. They tried to get the one stop to work, but unlike Leclerc, they just couldn't do it. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, this is now Lewis's worst ever start to a Formula One season, and that's even if you correct like the 2009 season to the modern point scoring system. This is his worst start ever. I think just to prove how kind of bad it is for him, there's 1 point between him and Lance Stroll, I think, currently in the Drivers' Championship. So yeah, not good for Lewis Hamilton. Really not shining. We're not seeing that kind of Lewis Hamilton drive that we're used to, where even if the car is bad, all the strategy is bad, he can still kind of pull something out of the bag. Here this weekend, there was just nothing, which is a shame to see. Part of me thinks that, he knows the car's rubbish, he knows he's leaving, so he's not really trying because he can't be bothered. But I also don't think that's a very Lewis Hamilton kind of mentality. So I don't really know what's going on here. But yeah, another bad one for Mercedes. Across to Red Bull, though, who had a fantastic weekend. Sergio Perez qualified P2, finished the race in second. Now, I know he was quite considerably off the back of Max Verstappen, but I think for Checo, this is his best weekend in ages. To be 0.06 off of Max in qualifying, his first front row since Miami 2023. He made some fantastic overtakes. I know there was the tyre imbalance in those overtakes as well, but nonetheless, they were fantastically brave overtakes that he did. I'm giving Checo a 10 out of 10 because I think he deserves it. He had a fantastic weekend. Really good stuff for him. And then finally, of course, there is Max Verstappen, who qualified first and finished the race in first. 10 out of 10, once again, for the Supermax. So there you go. There is my driver ratings for the Japanese Grand Prix. We're back in 2 weeks' time for the Chinese Grand Prix. In between now and then, though, there will be a video out on the channel on Friday. And if there's any big news to talk about, I'll be here on Saturday morning to discuss all of that with you then. Until then, though, have a good one. I'll see you then. Goodbye.